Thank you.
All right. Welcome to everybody. This is the Police Commission Ad Hoc Committee on the draft OPD policy of 15-01 on community policing. This is obviously the 9th of October, and thanks again to everybody who's joining us. Let's go ahead and jump right into, I've already welcome folks. The setup is that we're going to review the materials. We're going to look at what I think to be as a real good starting point for the policy, and that is what Commissioner Jesse Shea has put together. So we're going to look at that and discuss it, and hopefully we'll get into a real substantive discussion around the our ideas around the policy, or at least this first section, what we think should be the scope of this first section, what should be the values, and obviously the purpose of again, this first section, so that we come to a point where we can go ahead and we, the commissioners, can come to a decision about whether we want to go ahead and accept this, at least for right now, and then move on to the second section. So I'm seeing that we're joined by Creighton and Reggie. Good to see you all. Thanks for joining us. I don't know how much of you just what I just said you caught, but we're going to go right into a discussion around the first section of the policy, and we're going to look at specifically what Jesse, Commissioner Shea, has put together, and then talk about our ideas around scope, values, and purpose, so we can come to a decision at some point about whether we want to accept it as the first part of the policy, and then we'll talk about our initial thoughts of the second section. So let's go ahead and start. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to take a look at what Commissioner Shea has put together. So I had a couple of minor edits, but the more I went back and forth between what the policy says and what Commissioner Shea has put together, the more I liked what Jesse wrote. So I just wanted to put that out there. Brenda and Jesse, you have anything that you want to throw out? And thank you, Pastor Jackie, for joining us. You want to comment on any part of this? Okay, Jesse?
Yeah, well, I definitely want to recognize, I'm looking through some of the contributions that everyone has made. Mariano, Creighton, I see Reggie Lyles has also contributed about some of the thoughts that they think should be in this. I definitely wrote mine before I saw any of those. I think each one of those is an important topic to talk about, especially Mariano, talking about how the purpose of this policy is to build a partnership between OPD and the neighborhoods, establishing genuine two-way collaboration. I really enjoy it. I like that language. Creighton really blocking out what a definition to add to community-oriented policing. I think we still have to think about exactly what it is the name is going to be, whether it's community-oriented policing or community policing. That's certainly something to talk about. And definitely Mr. Lyles about incentive building and protecting and making sure that there are adequate incentives so that we actually have and can protect a community-oriented policing policy and structure and implementation that we want, and we can actually make sure it gets implemented. Those thoughts are all very much appreciated. That's what I've got so far before jumping in.
Okay, Mariano or Reggie, you got anything you want to add to what Jesse just said? regarding your contributions?
I do not.
Okay. Okay, let's then jump into what are people's thoughts around Jesse's I guess his dissertation regarding the first part of the policy. As I said, the more I read it and going back and forth between what the policy says now and what he wrote, the more I like what he wrote. So what are people's thoughts about his the structure, that is vision, purpose, and principles of community policing, and specifically what he wrote underneath each one of those sections. Any thoughts around? Anybody have any additions or deletions, corrections? Any thoughts around anything in any of these three sections that he wrote?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Sorry, Commissioner Harbin Forte, did you want to speak?
No, go ahead.
Yeah,
No.
I have a couple comments. Jesse, I saw what you had written, and I had kind of modeled some of what I had wrote based on some of the principles that you had called out. But the reason why I kind of had gone to the narrower definition of community-oriented policing versus like the goal of the Oakland Police Department is, I think I have a couple questions, I guess, first and foremost. Is that goal that you shared in the vision, is that the broader goal of the of OPD stated elsewhere? Because I think we have to be careful about, making sure that what we state here is narrow to community policing only and not extrapolating to the goal of the entire department. Because I think there could be some conflicts, between messaging and language that might be stated elsewhere. So I guess I would call out that first point. And then secondly, there's a question of whether or not, we want this language to be, a strategy or a set of principles. And the way I kind of think about those two different concepts is principles are kind of, the overarching, philosophy of things, but a strategy is the actual implementation of things. So making sure perhaps that what we create is clear in terms of this is what we want OPD to actually implement. So that kind of change is what I had shared in my edits, but I just wanted to kind of ask you, Jesse, first and foremost, like the goal, is that in line with the OPD's goal, or is that, because I think we just have to be careful about how we state things and be narrow enough with this policy, with community policing specifically.
I think that's a fair question. And one of the things that I wanted to absolutely ask this ad hoc about is a question of scope. What do we want this policy to be about? When you look at some of the other policies that similar jurisdictions have had, now I'm talking about San Francisco, Seattle, and Chicago, the ones that are up on the website. There is a clear delineation between their community policing strategy and also the concept of community policing. When you look at definitions of community policing, we're talking about a principle, right? A principle of how a police department engages with the community and the strategies within. And then that's the broader concept of it, of community engagement. It's basically a community engagement policy, which OPD does not have, to my knowledge. And then the smaller subset of that is the community policing program, or community-oriented policing program, specifically the CROs and how they interact with neighborhood councils. How I envisioned and what I wrote is essentially, yes, we should be working on this program, but we also want to think about how OPD engages in the community in a broader sense. And if we're working on a community-oriented policing or community policing policy, I feel like it is an opportunity for us here to really structure and put forth principles of what OPD should, the values that OPD should bring forth in their community engagement. So that's why I've written it the way that I have, and it's purposefully broad. So that is the question, right? Are we narrow or are we broader? And then my sense is after this portion, this context, this background, mission, values, expectations, and definitions, then we talk more specifically from those values, the very specific, the actualization or the realization of those values in the community resource officer and the community oriented policing program. So those are my thoughts about where I'm coming from when I draft the language that I have. With respect to the question of principles and strategies, I do tend to agree with that. I think this first initial section is about principles. I'm not tied to any of this language and exactly how it should be written as specific implementation versus overarching principles. It's just what I put to paper.
I think it's great. I mean, you definitely put a lot of thought in it. It looks awesome. So first and foremost.
Yeah, but I mean, it is a very explicit thing that we need to talk about, like what should be the scope of this. And yes, we should be careful about being purposeful in what we're doing. But my sense is we have the opportunity to talk about and to set policy about how OPD should be engaging and what values and what ways they should be engaging. There has been a lot of conversation at police commission meetings about how police officers engage with the community, what the things they say are and what the things they do, and about whether or not they are or are not engaging with the community. They're from the community, not from the community. And frankly, it feels like we have an opportunity here. And for one, think we should take it.
How's that square with you, Creighton?
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement. I think that if I'm understanding what Jesse's saying, he's saying that, you know, this policy should be broad enough to encompass all of, you know, OPD's actions and approaches and strategies. So it should be comprehensive. Is that correct, Jesse?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with that. It should be the kind of North Star for how OPD engages with the community, thinks about relationships, thinks about partnerships. The only question that I have is, you know, and this is more of like just a language question, you know, just to state like the goal of OPD is to promote. And yeah, I guess that makes sense to me. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't overstepping, you know, with language to say, okay, the goal of OPD is to promote public safety, where, you know, there may be broader resolutions or broader policies elsewhere that say the goal is X, Y, Z, and I didn't want there to be like a conflict. I wanted to just flag the potential for a conflict. That's all. So by saying that it's a little the community policing, community-oriented policing for OPD is the strategy to promote and protect public safety. It I guess diminishes the possibility for conflict by stating it in that sense, but still allows for the broad implications of what you had just said.
Yeah, and in terms of you know, principles and I should say, yeah, principles and strategy, I look at the principles laying out, you know, the basic framework, but the implementation, the strategy as being the more specific details that we incorporate into what we feel that the CRO should be doing. That's the actual for me, that's the actual implementation of the principles that we're seeing in front of us that Jesse had written. Any more comments on what Jesse had written? I just had a couple of really you know, minor questions. One was I wanted Jesse to talk about the second under vision the active building of positive relationships with members of the community on an agency basis and on an individual basis. So I just wanted to clarify that the use of the word agency there. What were we thinking, Jesse?
Oh, yeah. First, I want to recognize Pastor Jackie, who mentioned
Oh, I'm sorry.
that we had discussed the idea of positioning community-oriented policing or community policing as not just a department or area, but for all of OPD. And that is absolutely what I was thinking of. To be perfectly frank, community policing is not one of the top things that I was thinking about working on when I was when I joined the commission. And so certainly a lot of the things that are in this particular thing, this portion that I've written, have actually just come from listening to everyone here. And I hope is as much a fulfillment of everyone's thoughts and values as much as possible. And like I said, I'm not tied to it in any sort of way whatsoever. And Jose, your specific part about agency, I'm sorry, I need a little bit. Thank you. That is actually about communities of community-based organizations. That is specifically about community-based organizations. No, I'm sorry. That should be more clear, but frankly, I think the way this policy should be intended is that it on a agency, it talks about the department on an agency-wide or department-wide basis is building positive member relationships with members of the community, but on an officer or on a non-sworn positions basis, also building active and positive relationships. So agency should probably be department-wide basis.
Okay. Mariano, excuse me, I didn't see you right away.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of scope, I believe that at this point, what we can do is we can be, wide open, but at the same time focused. We can be wide open in terms of creativity, but focus in terms of focusing on partnership and collaboration. And it has to start now because most of us here are representing community, and we're working in partnership with OPD. Officer Fable is representing OPD. So, the partnership begins now. And I believe that, we have to, cement that in our thought, in our thinking right now, or else, we're going to falter down the line. So, and so I strongly believe that, the wording of community policing is important. And, if we can get into that discussion today or maybe next time, that's going to be really important because, there's even some of us are struggling with community policing, just that simple word. I've thought of many, community vigilance, I even like the word agency, in terms of more of a verb, but something that represents all residents in every neighborhood, that they have something that belongs to them. So how do we, we talk about empowerment, but let's really talk about empowerment. How do we really put that, go to every resident and tell them, this is your policy. This is the policy that is representing your beliefs and what you should buy into. So in terms of the scope, I think that right now, we should be wide open, but focused. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Reggie?
Good afternoon. I'm going to play the devil's advocate here because I am seriously in love with community policing. But what I think scares some people is if they think that we're going to have 120 small city states called communities, and in these little, not city states, these are community states with their own little police agency, or their own dictate of how the police should perform. And I think that's what frightens them, because they've always had the ability to call the police and get exactly what they want. Now that power or that ability to get exactly what you want is now being shared by everybody in the community through community policing. So we have to, I think, write this policy in a way where we say, no, we're going to have one police department. And that police department is governed by, United States Constitution, state of California Constitution, and then federal and state laws and city ordinances. However, every community ought to be able to say what is their priority, what is most important to them. And then I would also think that every community ought to have members of the police department that reflects the community from which they come from. So we should not have a police force that is comprised of a lot of folk who live up in Butte County or from Butte County, and not from Arroyo Viejo, a Mosswood, a Bushrod. And that should be the target goal in general. That's what we're emphasizing with community policing. But we only have one police department.
Okay, that's interesting.
Does that throw you off? Does that offend anyone, or does it make anyone uncomfortable? I'd like to hear.
I would too. Does that make anybody uncomfortable, or anybody have any comments on what Reggie just said?
I could be the one to say, so no, it doesn't make me uncomfortable. No, it doesn't make me question any portion of this, but I think that a portion of this could be that we may not have enough people for now from our communities being Oakland police officers. And in the meanwhile, we may need to unfortunately deal with the status quo, which is there are people who are not from the community policing this particular community. I do think that we have an opportunity here to sort of delineate, maybe, I'm not sure if it's in this section or in sort of the priorities or qualities of the CRO that we want, that there is a preference for people from the community, or at the very least, even if they aren't from the community, officers who have demonstrated a commitment to this community, even if they don't live in this particular community, whatever it may be. Again, I do think that's definitely something that we care about and something to discuss maybe when we're talking about the qualities of a CRO or specific roles and responsibilities. But I absolutely agree.
I just want to say that I don't think what I'm saying is mutually exclusive. I'm not saying to eliminate any officers from anywhere. If you're going to have community policing, then you're going to have representatives from that community to have the opportunity to be able to police their own community. And so by saying that doesn't mean you're negating anyone who applies, but we want people from Oakland to be able to work at the Oakland Police Department. And by the way, the fire department too. Why not?
Absolutely. Brenda.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's not in response to Reggie's point, so it was to the broader goal, to the beginning. So if anybody else has something on Reggie's point, I'll defer until then.
Okay, Creighton?
I'll hop back in line after Commissioner Harbin Forte, because
Okay.
my comment is in response to Reggie's comment either.
Okay. You still have your hand up, Jesse? Did you have something?
Different point. Mariano has his hand up though.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mariano.
Yeah, it's to this point. So to Reginald's point, no, I don't think I'm offended or taken aback or surprised. But one thing we need to do is we need to standardize a policy that applies the same to all neighborhoods, and not I know that there's certain demographics, certain dynamics in different neighborhoods, and that we have to respect. But a policy has to be standardized. Otherwise, then we're kind of we're failing, so to speak, if we start tailoring this policy to specifics. And I'm going to be blunt. Folks, neighborhoods up in the hills have more means. They have better ways of communicating, a meeting. They have those means. Folks in other places may not even have the opportunity to attend a meeting. But the policy, community policing policy, should be standardized so that it is just as equitable in all neighborhoods. So that's all I have to say to that. But in respect to there's different dynamics in neighborhoods, I agree. There's going to be different community representation that are going to be varied, and that's fine. But I think the policy has to be standardized. Thank you.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. And in response to what Reggie was saying, I think that's the real answer. What Mariano just said to people's feelings that they had, they could get exactly what they wanted before, and now they have to share. Well, if they have to share, then they need to, they just need to deal with that, because we only have one police department. So they're going to learn to share those kinds of resources. But again, if in fact you have within each beat a network that's plugged into that beat, that neighborhood council of local block leaders in that beat, then you should have a real good idea of what are the priorities. To Reggie's point, what are the priorities within that beat? And those priorities, I would expect, would be, to one degree or another, different from the flats to the hills, certainly. And in respect to, and again, it goes back to the standardization of the basic idea that each beat determines what is most important. That is, what are the priorities, as well as what's the standardized method by which the CRO deals with that priority as set by the beat, and do it in partnership with the beat. That is, take it through the SARA process. So that whole process should be standardized, but it's going to be reflective of what the individual beat really feels is the most important within their beat. In regard to cops reflecting the beat, certainly that definitely is going to have to be the goal. So part of what we may well consider putting in the language of community policing is a mandate, if you will, to construct a pipeline. And I'm just, I think that the way that we're going to have more police reflective of the beats that they serve is to have a real pipeline built, so that in fact young people actually consider becoming an Oakland cop. So the question is, how do we do that, and how do we incorporate that into language if we think that it's relevant? And it certainly is relevant. How do we do that in terms of this policy? And do we do that in terms of this policy? And secondly, and I definitely think this second point definitely should be part of the policy, and that is the training. There should definitely be a community input that is recognized as an integral part of the training. That is, the LPD as a part of its training should not see that the community comes in and does some sort of a guest presentation, but in fact, an integral part that's recognized by OPD in the academies is that the community will have a real part of the entire process, the entire academy. It's not just going to be post. It's not going to just be from the police perspective, but in fact, there's a recognized part of the academy training that's actually done by the community. Yeah, the curriculum is developed by the community, presented by community members, and ideally even the classes out in the community. So that it's not just shouldn't just be a curriculum put together by OPD of only police perspectives, but it should be actually reflective of what the community wants in terms of the curriculum and what they want to present and be presented by the community. So I think that needs to, in terms of training, that really needs and should be, I think, a part of the policy that we put together. So Reggie, does that align with what your thinking is?
Yes, it is. I will just say, lastly, is that we have to cite these things in everything we write so that it can affect culture. If you know, so it can't be ignored or slighted. I think in this particular policy, we have to say that's a target goal that we want, so that it can influence HR decisions and other issues going forward.
Any other comments regarding Reggie's comments or mine? If not, then we're going to move on to.
Mine were in the chat.
I'm sorry?
My comments as it relates to both of your statements were in the chat that I can't see currently, but I do believe it would be possible to put the reference both to training and making sure that officers are reflective of the communities that they were serving. And that could be overall. As a part of, Jesse, if you scroll up under the vision portion and the breakout that discuss how this is accomplished, and you have those bullets there, those could be bullets. Because the reality is what you are suggesting is that in order to achieve the stated goal, these things are required. So along with mutual respect, active building, active collaboration, community-led, a training piece, I think, could go there, as well as representation could go there. So that's kind of what I stated in.
Thank you, Pastor Jackie. Jesse, what's your, you have any thoughts on that?
I like that, and I also like the other suggestion Pastor Jackie had or asked about, which was whether or not we can, the questions about a force and community policing that reflects Oakland can be in this policy, or is an HR thing. I know that Lieutenant Fable in a previous meeting did say, like, right now the process is whoever signs up, that's the next person who's slotted to be a CRO. I think that we have the opportunity here to make a process, perhaps an application process, whatever, or some sort of test, kind of like when you become a detective. I think that is not in this section, but probably more in the qualifications and duties and responsibilities of a CRO. That's our next part, but certainly something where we can think about how we make that tie between this portion, this section, and the next one.
Okay. Brenda.
Yes, thank you. Up to the top, this is minor wordsmithing in the vision. Ronnie, if we can go back up there. Where there was some concern about, whether stating that the goal may be overly broad and may involve conflicts, we could change the to one of the goals of the Oakland Police Department is to promote, etc. And then just in terms of the list of what would be required, it really is just language instead of active building of, that we say actively building positive relationships. And then similarly, the next point, actively building collaborative partnerships, and delete the word of after building. Yeah. Again, those were just in terms of wordsmithing, in terms of just the language. I agree with the points that have been made by everyone else, that how we can expand and include various things.
Okay, Annie Creighton, I see your hand up.
Yeah, and maybe in addition to like community-led, community-directed, because, you know, there may be instances in which, you know, the community directs rather than is being an active leader. So I think it may be helpful to just call that out in the sense that, you know, there may be instances in which OPD acts at the direction of the community without, you know, the community actually physically leading an effort.
What a concept, Creighton. I like that.
Revolutionary. And you know, there's another quick question that I have. You know, we've mentioned a couple times the CROs, but you know, to the broadness, to the breadth of this policy, do folks envision this being applicable to all officers, and being a strategy and a framework for which all officers rely on it for interactions, relationships, and guidance on how they engage with the community? Or are you thinking that it's just CROs? Or I see below there's, you know, foot patrol officers, CRTs, but if we're talking about breadth, we should really think about all officers, each and every single officer, that it's applicable to all officers.
Here,
I
Creighton.
thought that that's what we originally discussed when we came on, because again, at least in my thinking, we are discussing a culture shift.
That's
and so
right.
we are no longer thinking of community policing as a division or a department. Every officer should see themselves as a community policing officer.
Yeah.
Now, how that shows up in Piedmont and, you know, is different than how that shows up on 85th and International. It's different than how that shows up in the Fruitvale. But I would think that the goal is to, and, you know, it's difficult to change culture, but I do think that there are some things that we can explicitly state. And if it needs to be tweaked, let them tweak it, but let it not be because we have not said very clearly that what is needed is a culture shift of the whole department, so that community policing is not just what we do in communities in crisis. That's my thinking. And I thought that's what I heard when I originally came on. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. But if that's not what we're going for, then in all honesty, I don't know what we're doing.
I have to say that also. And that's what it cannot be isolated or into one group out of the department. The police department has to be the Oakland Police Department, which is a community-based police department. From the chief to the very first or the last hired recruit, everybody has to be a community policing officer. And that's why I'm saying it has very much to do with hiring. It has very much to do with qualification. It has very much to do with what does this department want? Not me coming 200 miles, driving here and spending 5 or 6 days here and then driving back home 200 miles. I don't care what you think. I'm just here to do a job and get paid and enforce the law. No, you got to be a part of our community. And so we should state this right up front. This is our target goal. If it takes us 25 years to get there, so be it. At least let us make sure this is what we want. Because you can defeat 18 CROs in a department of 600 people. You can isolate them, you can defeat them, you can make them persona non grata and take away all their effectiveness.
I agree. I also agree with Sister Jackie. You know, there cannot be any, this is not a specialized policy for specialized policemen
That's right.
or women. Every police officer has to abide and be trained or recruited based on the principles of this policy. So Sister Jackie, you are absolutely correct. This is what we all signed up for. Thank you.
Yeah. And I agree. I mean, to be clear, I agree completely. And I think the reality of CROs in Oakland is that they are being pulled off to engage in typical law enforcement functions. So that means that other law enforcement officers are either engaging in community work or there's no community work happening. So that means that, you know, we can't rely on just the CROs to be the kind of the stars in leading community work. It has to be each and every officer. So I agree with Pastor Jackie, with Reggie, with Mariano in their comments.
So if you want to be a sergeant, you can't be a sergeant if you're not a community police sergeant. You want to be a lieutenant, you don't get selected unless you do well in community policing and accept the values and the culture of that. You can't be the captain, you can't be the deputy chief, nor can you be the chief. And that's when you have cultural shift within the police department. Because people
maybe
will
that
change.
Language is important. And the example that I will give is this. There's a gentleman in the city who is clergy. Brilliant, amazing, pastor, wonderful. He does not refer to himself as reverend. He doesn't refer to himself as pastor or any of those traditional names. He refers to himself as servant. He does it for himself, but he also does it for those that he's going to encounter because he wants it to be made clear that he is not approaching the table in some kind of hierarchical fashion, trying to use his title, position, education in order to leverage what is going on. He is entering the room as a servant. And for me, that transfers to this discussion as well. It's when you come into the department is a community policing department. That's what it is. So there is no opportunity to be sectioned off or to be derailed, recognizing that it may not fit practically to what we see happening now, but that's what vision is. That's what vision casting is about. Not necessarily dealing with what we are, but what we think should be and shall be and how we'll get there. And Jesse, I wanted to point out under the vision language, the suggestion was around looking at critical to fulfilling that goal. Is that the community's belief or should that be the department's belief?
Both.
So I lift that up, that critical to the fulfilling that goal, I would think is the department belief that the community's well-being is at the heart of its law enforcement activities.
What do you think, Jess?
It's in the chat, it's wordsmithing, agree or disagree, but I do think it needs to be reflected that the department believes that the well-being of the community is at the heart of all their law enforcement activities, because that's a value and it needs to be explicitly stated if we hope that that's embraced.
Sorry, I was just struggling with trying to unmute myself. I absolutely agree with that. And I'm making the edits as we talk. We had some technical difficulties and now I'm on top of it.
No worries, thank you.
So, Pastor Jackie, so what you're saying is that it is OPD that should carry that belief that what their goal is to promote and protect public safety, and that should be explicitly stated as opposed to something that the community believes?
Okay,
Both.
Jesse, can you make that a little larger because I'm still in denial about my need for glasses? So if it's possible to increase the size of that, I can clarify. Okay, so the statement reads that one of the goals of the Oakland Police Department is to promote and protect public safety while respecting the dignity and rights of all. We're speaking about the Oakland Police Department. Critical to that goal, and now I am of the opinion that it should be added It is the department's belief, because the community already feels that they should be at the center of the activities. Part of the reason it's not realized is because the department doesn't necessarily embrace that. And if they do embrace that, it does not always show up in particular communities the way it should show up. And so I think the department has to be the one that believes that the community is at the center of all of their law enforcement activities. So that's the change that I'm suggesting. You can either add department and eliminate community's belief, or you can keep both of them. But I think it needs to be stated that the department believes that the community is at the heart of all they do. The well-being of the community.
Excuse me, Pastor. Let me advocate for both, and this is why. If we say all the community and the department believe the well-being of the community is the number one thing for the department, because some communities don't think Deep East Oakland deserves 2 police officers on a beat, or 3 or 4 officers on one beat because they have more crime. They think it should be equally shared. You know, if a community or a small portion of the town which has very little crime, they think they should have their officer up there also doing nothing. When a mile and a half from them, there's one officer overwhelmed. So we believe in directed community policing. Also believes in directed police deployment, meaning wherever the crime is, that's where you put the most officers.
I'm not opposed. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
just make sure that it is the department's belief as well.
And
So
I agree
if
with
it's
that.
both,
That it should be department and community.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, great.
Sorry,
we-
Commissioner Jesse. I just had to get that up.
all right,
I
thank you.
I am happily take anything.
I think
Please.
we're moving. I think we have progress.
So I think we are moving.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can we put in the language then? Critical to that goal is the department's and the community's belief, or critical to that goal is the belief of the department and the community that their well-being.
Yeah, so we should
Something
have,
that the
we should
community
have,
is
we should have both if we're all agreed.
Right, so it should be, I was just trying to get the language so that we can all read it and see. So critical to that goal, we can leave it is the departments and the community's belief that
Correct.
that the community's well-being is at the
Yes.
heart of law enforcement activities.
That's it.
The departments and the communities, okay. That the community's well-being is at the heart of law enforcement activities.
So that looks good, everybody?
No, it should, and, oh, is that the department and the community believe? Okay.
All right.
Department and community believe, yeah. Okay,
A minor thing, under open and honest communication and transparency, instead of 2, I would suggest all. I'm sorry, I would suggest with all stakeholders and take out 2.
with, yeah, with
the last-
us.
Yeah, instead of 2, have with. And then let me make another suggestion regarding down toward the bottom. I guess it'd be like the 4th line from the bottom, where it talks about traditional, non-traditional problems that does the least amount of harm. I would suggest that we substitute does the least amount of harm, take that out and put in mitigate unintended consequences.
Unintended negative consequences.
That would be fine. 'Cause that's what we want to, that's what we want to convey. Unintended negative, Rania. There you go. Okay.
It's me right now controlling it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Mhm.
Trying to take some stuff off, Ronnie. So
And I would actually just go back to the other comment I made earlier about community directed problem solving.
help me out with where that is.
Community on
Right
the-
here.
There, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, community led and directed. Yeah.
Thank you. So why don't we go section by section, since we're getting down into wordsmithing, right? As miles it is.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else that goes into vision or suggestions? I want to take everything. I don't have not nearly close to the experience that you all have with community policing and neighborhood councils.
I don't, if I may, I don't, the last one about doing undue harm, I don't quite understand that one. Because if the police department that mitigates unintended negative consequences, are we talking about de-escalation strategies, or are we talking about every officer predicting how unintended negative consequences are? I mean, I don't know how you can do that if you're a patrol officer and you know I'm arresting the breadwinner of this family. You know, but the guy is a domestic violence perpetrator, but he does pay and pay for for his children to go to Catholic school. So if he's in jail, he doesn't work, he doesn't get paid. They're not able to pay the Catholic school tuition. So that's a negative consequence. So I think every time you have police around, there are going to be negative consequences predicated on whose opinion. And so, I think we ought to say something like non-traditional problems that adopt de-escalating strategies. But I don't know how you can. I think we leave ourselves open for hypercriticism if we're to say, well, I'm not going to police you because it may cause somebody some harm. Maybe in order to keep the peace, somebody has to be harmed. And I've been in their situation. Somebody has to be handcuffed. Somebody has to be thrown to the ground. Somebody has to be arrested. And so, in a real practical way, we don't leave ourselves open for those who come in who criticize folk who think like we're thinking. All you doing is taking away police officers. You're just saying eliminate the police. No, I'm not. I'm saying I want to use de-escalation strategies, but I can't be in control of unpredictable harm that's going to cause a family or a group of families.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Commissioner Jesse, since this is your language, I assume, can you share a little bit of what your thinking was when you used that phrase?
So one of the things that I thought about was actually in the context of Lieutenant Fable's presentation that was, what was it, 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago? I can't remember now, about the apartment complex that there was a large SARA project for. And part of what I was thinking about, even though there was obvious positive benefits of sort of the action that had occurred, was, well, with the change, with the arrests, with the sort of remodeling and the recoding and the new property management, what harm or what negative consequences occurred to the people that were living there? Who was displaced? Who who may have been, you know, traumatized by, say, search warrants or police raids or
Okay.
enforcement activity. These are the things that I'm thinking about.
So your
right?
concern was more community impact.
Yes.
So
Agreed.
kind of unintended consequences, community impact. So I do get that. Okay, so I'll give that some thought because I understand exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And that's why my phrasing was do the least amount of harm to the community, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and I can appreciate, what Jesse put in there. The words, that does the least amount of harm to the community. My suggestion that, that be pulled out in, and have, that mitigates unintended negative consequences is that I want, CROs and in specific, but certainly OPD in general, to think ahead about what are the negative consequences of their actions. Obviously, if you got to handcuff somebody or throw them to the ground, then that's a negative consequence in one real respect. But I want officers to think about what would be a negative consequence that is not their intention. So if they're going to take a negative action, let's use handcuff somebody. What is the I want them to think about what would be a consequence of their actions, whether it be handcuffing or anything else that they really didn't want to intend, but that happened because they didn't think about it ahead of time. So that's the step that I want them to actually think about. Reggie, I want to hear what you have to say about that.
I think you leave yourself open for our critics to say officers don't have time to do that in the real world, to think about negative consequences. But they can think about de-escalation strategies. Like before if we have to do a search warrant and whatever on a house, and it's only a daytime search warrant, why do you always have to show up at 5:59 in the morning? You could do the same thing at 7 o'clock, etc. Those kind of things doesn't have. But if we just say we want to use de-escalation strategies, in other words, we don't go to the very top. Don't roll out that tank just because you're going to do a search warrant on one person's home. I'm thinking of a tragedy that happened on 100th Avenue across the street from then council member Leo Bazille's house, where they came and knocked on a man's a door because his ex-wife, who no longer lived there, had done a crime in a white-collar crime of checks in Concord. So they got a daytime only warrant. They showed up at his house at 5:59, so it could be, now it's daytime because that law is very hard and fast there. 6 a.m. that's daytime. They showed up at 6 a.m. daytime and start banging on his door. This Deep East Oakland, a metal door. He gets up. He's looking around to see who's that. He's thinking criminals are bringing into his house. Then in the back, in his backyard, they had an OPD officer with a AR-15 long rifle, sniper rifle, shot him in the back of the head and killed him. The argument was that he was going down. We thought he had a gun in his hand and he was going down and maybe have injured someone. That's a real life lived experience for me and the people of Oakland. That's the kind of thinking. So I was asked to be on the panel to review this. And I asked a question. And the question I asked was, did you think about placing a phone call and telling them, this is the Oakland Police Department, could you please come out? It's called a pretext phone call. Did you think about that? No, we didn't. No, we didn't. So he's dead. His wife no longer lived, never had stopped living there for 6 months. And all she did was write a check in some mall in Concord for, $60, $70. And who was he? He was the Elmhurst janitor who had been an Oakland Public Schools employee, solid employee for 25 years. And it never dawned on them to, make a phone call first.
So then can we add, Deacon Lyles, the language of de-escalation strategies to that last sentence? Where he says it will require all department members to be trained in cultural diversity and competency, active listening, and effective community engagement, and add there a commitment to, or whatever the language is going to be, de-escalation strategies?
I like commitment to.
Okay.
I really like that, to de-escalation strategies, but I think you leave yourself open for a right hook when you say that we should mitigate unintended consequences.
That language will be replaced. He wrote in the margin that language would be replaced with something similar to do the least amount of harm to the community. Because I agree with you. And even though I understand what he meant in terms of adverse impact, not necessarily to the person who's being engaged or who's having the encounter with the police, but to, the folks standing by, if you will. So with the example that Commissioner Jose gave, if you do have to throw someone in handcuffs, does that mean that you have to snatch the cell phone and beat everybody that's standing around trying to film you do it? So you
have to shoot their dogs. Oakland had OPD had a history of shooting everybody's dogs when they came in. Do you have to do that?
My brother had a pit bull, so I actually do remember that. But I think that language may work better if we add in a commitment to
de-escalation.
De-escalation strategies. I think that works.
Mariano.
Thank you. So this section here, I think, is begging for us to mention the restorative justice approach. Community policing should address the harm, and the harm in the instance that, or the example that Reggie gave out, the dad who was putting his kids through school, and if he gets arrested, he can't do that anymore. That's a result of someone's harm, because the guy is a domestic violence perpetrator. But if police right now don't care or look at that, they just go in, they were called, he was perpetrating his behavior, and he's arrested. Who cares about the consequences? Restorative justice process, puts together, establishes a plan, to deal with the harm, the person who performed the harm, and it's not the victim. I forget the term that the process uses, but also that party, and then it brings together a community together, and they address that. So they don't just simply go in there and they establish what's gonna take place later. So I would say that at this point, and I know that it was in some language before, I don't remember where, but it does, maybe in Creighton's proposal earlier, but it did mention restorative process. And, I think that's so important here, because it's specifically talking to, the participation of the community. Every neighborhood should have it should be a community advocate. That when the police come, they come in, that neighborhood should have an advocate, communicating with that officer, or that those officers. But so it's important to include that there, and I can work on that later, or there's some that needs to be included in this policy, because you can't just go in, and then just leave, whatever consequences are left. You know, that was my big question with the Hillside presentation, is that, you know, there was a lot of good results, but, you know, what was established there so that this would not happen again? You know, how do you deal with people performing, you know, just being knuckleheads in a neighborhood, you know? And then so I'll stop there, but I believe that this is begging that language to be included.
Thank you, Mariano. Any other suggestions in terms of this language? But I think that's a really good point about incorporating restorative justice practices into these principles.
I have a question for Brenda Harburn Fort. Should that be for the penalization phase? I mean, you're a judge, so you when it get to that phase, we get into restorative justice, because if we use the scenario about domestic violence, the law doesn't ask me as a police officer if I should make an arrest under 273.5. I must make an arrest of the primary perpetrator, right? I mean,
That's very true, and particularly if there's any injury, you kind of better make an arrest if you want to save your job.
And when you mention injury, but correct me if I'm wrong, injury means any trauma, no matter how slight.
Right.
So it could be a bruise. It could be my arm is sore. Right. It doesn't have to be jaw broken or nose broken or bleeding from the face.
Exactly. And the other thing too, the history to that comes from a lawsuit where women sued because OPD used to just come out and after a man had beat a woman to death almost, and just kind of talk to him and, oh, don't do that again, and then walk away and leave the victim and the perpetrator inside the home. And, you know, next time, pretty soon she'd be dead. So legal aid lawyers and others and other women groups, many years ago, perhaps in the 70s, legal aid and others sued OPD, saying that your response to domestic violence charges is totally unacceptable, and you are causing more harm than good when you come in and not take these men to jail. So, I will agree though too that the officer on the street can't really worry about, oh, okay, if I take this person in, he might lose his job, he or she. We got women perpetrators as well. They might lose their job. The family might not be able to pay rent. That we really can't expect officers to do that kind of analysis on any kind of regular basis. If a crime has been committed, then you have to arrest. So yes, you're right, Reggie. You gotta take the arrest down. And I don't think that we need to tell officers that you gotta think all of that through. It's unrealistic to expect them to think all of that through.
I agree.
You're sort of reacting to in the moment.
I agree it's unrealistic. I agree that officer should make that arrest. I also think, though, that we can build that the department should look into harm reduction strategies. Perhaps not if not the exact police officer, but perhaps a call to, I don't know, Department of Violence Prevention, a social worker, connecting the victims of violent crime with resources so that they can either break the cycle of violence or have opportunities or options outside of a person who is, in the example that Reggie used, the main breadwinner, if they want to take that option, you know, or if it's a situation where just the arrest needs to happen, people need to separate, heads cool, and then we come back together. That's not for the individual officer to decide, but at the very least, those options or resources should, at the department should have access or refer or be able to implement them. That's my thought.
And I
I
would
see
think at the
Creighton's hand.
very least, even if you can't get into the weeds of what would happen based on a particular situation, I think what could be articulated in this particular statement is a commitment to repair,
Mhm.
right? Because I think that's the whole concept of restorative justice is to repair the harm. We want to reduce the harm, but if harm is done, there
Yep.
ought to be a similar commitment if you too are a part of the community, because that is what
Yep.
we're saying, that
Sure.
officers are not separate from the community. They are a part of the community. So when a member of the community is damaged, we are all damaged, including them.
Exactly.
And so there
Exactly.
needs to be some kind of departmental commitment to the concept of repair.
And
And I think Creighton did put something in the chat that certainly could be useful or be an option or a way to do that. But I do think, as I agree with Judge, you can't tell people what to do, but you can certainly articulate a goal that there should be a commitment to repairing the harm that is done.
And I don't think these are mutually exclusive concepts either. I'm not disagreeing that we don't put anything in there about violence reduction and offering some resources and stuff. And often particular, and I keep going back to domestic violence, often the only time a perpetrator is going to get domestic violence counseling is when they're under the jurisdiction of a court and they're mandated to attend usually 52 sessions of domestic violence counseling. That will help to mitigate the harm if they do that. And we know domestic violence affects not only the victim, but the family as well. And when children witness domestic violence, they tend to grow up to be domestic abusers themselves, or so all kinds of things, there are all kinds of consequences. But I don't think I think we're all saying the same thing. I think it's just a matter of kind of coalesce it and put it together so that all of the points are met.
Creighton, did you want to speak to your point that you made in chat?
yeah, no, I think exactly to Commissioner Harbin Forte's point and Pastor Jackie's point, I think we're all on the same page. I think the repair aspect is really key. And for OPD, that first requires listening and acknowledging the harm that occurred. And then two, figuring out how that harm does not occur again, so that there's a change in policy. So if, instead of 5:59 in the morning for that search warrant, then okay, we're doing something different based on the community feedback, based on the community's lived experience that had harm associated with that police action, and making sure that, that harm doesn't occur again through changes in actual policy, practices, and procedures.
Yeah, and if you did nothing more than say you cannot serve a warrant for a nonviolent crime before noon or something like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with an OPD policy. You don't need to show up at anybody's house at 6 o'clock in the morning on a bad check case, even if it's charged as a felony. I mean, you just don't need to do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so those are kinds of things that a policy change in OPD. I mean, it may take some legislation at some point, and now it's a good time. We got a good legislature who could implement statewide a requirement that you don't serve search warrants for nonviolent crimes at before a certain time of the morning, before 8 a.m., something like that.
That's correct, and you don't have to come out with the battering ram to knock down the metal door and have snipers in the backyard.
Exactly.
And so it was a great embarrassment for Oakland because they got it totally wrong. They got the wrong guy, and they were heavy-handed in the military weaponry that they had, and they thought they had done it right. They thought they had done it right. So it's a culture that has to shift. You have to say, okay, $70 worth of checks, so what? Get them next time.
Yep. Pastor Jackie had language in the chat that said commitment to working in partnership with the impacted community to repair the harm. Yeah. Commitment to working in partnership with the impacted community.
And I say in partnership only because they are not experts in that work, but there are people who are.
Yeah,
So it
exactly.
makes it clear that the expectation is not for officers to come up with what restoration looks like or what reparations looks like, but to
Right.
work in partnership with those who do this work on a consistent basis to make that determination for the community.
Jesse, you have your hand up. Did you have something?
No,
Okay.
I just haven't had time to put it down. Sorry.
All righty. This is absolutely stellar conversation, and it does so much to really refine and improve upon this this language. So we're so appreciative of the input from everybody here. So I just wanted to mention that this is just spectacular. I just can't stress that enough, because this is really the meat and potatoes of where we're going with the next section. So thank you so much for your input. Any other commitments or any other comments on the language as we have it now?
I would so much appreciate any language or thoughts about the department's role in the neighborhood councils. And perhaps part of that could be, I know that I attended a CPAB meeting this past week, and it sounds like there's some discussions about how that's going to change or look. Creighton, perhaps you could help us out. Maybe thoughts about the name change or what might be envisioned.
Yeah, I think it's still a little premature to kind of, for at least for me to kind of speak on where we're going, because we're not there yet. But the idea is, law enforcement should participate in neighborhood councils like as a member of the community, and should support community-led and community-led efforts. But they're, at the end of the day, they're led by the community rather than led by law enforcement, and that orientated shift is what we're talking about. I don't think we have yet developed a framework for their participation, but I think it would be one that is at its core developed by neighborhood councils and developed by community members, because they will reach out to law enforcement, to OPD on projects, and OPD should avail itself to participate in those projects.
I certainly couldn't agree with that more, and that's where I'm hoping we go with what our eventual policy will look like, and that is that it makes it clear that OPD and the city has a distinct obligation to direct whatever resources to the grassroots, so that the grassroots on a block by block basis are organized, and that in fact that block by block networking plugged into the local neighborhood councils determines what the CRO does, and certainly the SARE process, which is part of what's included in the draft policy, indicates exactly how those priorities should be processed, if you will. So that's where I'm hoping we go with this.
And Jesse, on the restorative justice piece, for example, one thought that I've had in connection to neighborhood councils is that neighborhood councils would host spaces for restorative justice-based dialogues with OPD to occur, and they would be neighborhood centered, and that would allow for OPD officers who are patrol officer CROs, the captains for beat, the captains for area, the deputy chiefs, to participate in those neighborhood centered restorative justice spaces, so that healing occurs at the block and neighborhood level, and it's block and neighborhood specific, rather than situated elsewhere in the city, or broader than what would be broader than a neighborhood or block issue.
I absolutely agree. I think that's actually a pretty good transition into thinking about the next sections that we're going to be working on, and hopefully everyone will think about for the next 2 weeks, which is when we're starting to get into the roles of the department, CROs, sergeants, captains, and perhaps even community meetings, what that looks like, where they should go, who they should partner with. I hope that you all will think about these things as we start to move on to the next part of the policy. Jose?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only what that may look like and what we think should be the language, but also let's always keep in mind that in terms of whatever policy or whatever language we put in this, that the goal will be empowerment of the neighborhoods. If in fact there's instituted a process, a procedure by which we have restorative justice circles based on the block level around a particular problem, what an empowerment that would be for that block to be leading and directing that sort of a process. That would just be absolutely huge for anybody on that block to know that they in fact are directing that process, and that restorative justice circle around a problem on that block, that they have a direct impact on it. And that's the kind of empowerment that at the grassroots level we want to see, as well as at the neighborhood level that we want to see in terms of priorities. People empowered, knowing that in fact they can have a direct impact on dealing with problems on their block, in their neighborhood, whether they be serious or quality of life issues. So that's we should always keep that in mind in whatever language we use. How does this empower the neighborhood, the community, the block? So
and Jose, just to piggyback off of that point, as it relates to OPD specifically, there's empowerment in holding OPD accountable to the harms that have occurred. So some of those restorative justice spaces are, resolving problems on the block, but also resolving, perhaps practices that OPD has conducted on a specific block or in a specific neighborhood that have been harmful, and airing out those processes or those problems or those issues and asking OPD to change, and having that accountability through those restorative justice spaces for OPD to change based on the feedback. And this is going to Pastor Jackie's point, change or repair the harm that has occurred through those restorative justice spaces.
No, and that's absolutely true. And that's one of the things that also I would suggest that we think about is how can we move to a place where in fact those kinds of discussions occur. And in my thinking, there has to be really specific officers that are involved in those discussions that really are prepared to have those kinds of deep discussions. But I think that's absolutely something that I'd like to see where we go eventually. And I say eventually because I think it's going to be a process of developing a whole program, as I see it, around these kinds of discussions between the community at a deep level and OPD with specific people that really, I'm talking about police officers, that really are prepared at the highest level to have those kinds of discussions with the community. Because it's going to be a difficult conversation, but with some real rewards coming out of that, I would believe.
And in addition to, Commissioner Dorado, in addition to prepared, I would also add trained to have those discussions.
Yeah.
Trained at the chief level, at the officer level, so that they are equipped with understanding how to navigate restorative justice spaces and listen to the pain of the community without being defensive at a departmental level.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. It's going to have to take a real orientation, training if you will, as you put it, to have those kinds of discussions, because they're not going to be easy. But you know, as we all know, the best things many times are not easy at all. In fact, that's why it takes so much work.
On that point,
ahead.
I think in the beginning, if this is part of the policy, we need to expect that it's going to be a long road, and we need to bring in those expert facilitators in the beginning, to assist in this process. Oakland is renowned nationally and internationally for their restorative justice approaches. They've established them in OUSD, they've established it in communities. And so we need to reach out to those experts locally to assist in making sure that, this isn't just oh yeah, we're going to do this, I'm going to hold someone's hand, because this is the approach, the pushback on this approach. So we need to make sure that OPD does not do that. So in the beginning, I would strongly urge that we bring in those expert facilitators to make sure that, that's cemented in the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariano. And it seems as though a theme that we all can get behind is repairing the harm, because it's one thing to put in on language on a piece of paper around, for example, the role of the CROs. But if in fact we do not also emphasize this kind of repair of the harm that's been done, it on a long-term basis, it's not going to be as successful certainly as it can be. So I'm really glad that's being lifted up, the idea of repairing the harm that's been done and doing it in a real comprehensive and intelligent way. So any other, it's now, I want to be respectful of people's time, now 3:30 or 3:32 thereabouts. Any other comments? And let me direct this to Jesse. You've got some real substantive work that you can do on this policy. So if there's anything else that we can add to your plate, if not, I think we'll go ahead and leave this to Jesse, if that's okay.
You're not going to get away with it that easily. So I'm absolutely going to work on it. I think how we're going to move forward in the next couple of meetings is probably that as we roll through our meetings, we'll have two parts of it. We'll see what the rewrite looks like in its finalized form, maybe take a look at it on one piece, but then also have this very great discussion about what exactly should be in the next section that we're working on. And I hope that works out for everyone. This is not, you're going to keep seeing these policies, and we're going to keep writing and rewriting until we get it right.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. Mariano, go ahead.
Yeah, if we're kind of done, I just need to let the group know that, I've been struggling with some, they're not really health issues, but I've been preparing for the last month and a half for a post surgery that I'm going into October the 18th. And I will be missing October the 23rd meeting, and possibly my recuperation is supposed to be from 6 to 8 weeks. So I don't know what I'll be capable of doing or not doing, but I'm thinking that the 23rd, I will definitely not attend the Zoom. But after that, I think I'll take it, week at a time. But I just wanted to inform you folks that, with a heavy heart, this is one of my better more enjoyable community activities here with this ad hoc. But so I just wanted to inform you folks, if you don't see my ugly mascara, it's because I am recuperating. Thank you.
May I, if I can address first, Mariano, Godspeed in terms of recovery. You'll be in my prayers, I think in the prayers of everybody here, that you have a safe surgery and that your recovery is beyond expectations because you're just going to be flying through. I also want to say that Commissioner Dorado, by the time of our next meeting, will officially not be a commissioner. And so, and I know, Mariano, that you won't be here. I think that at our next meeting, we can certainly say some wonderful things about Commissioner Dorado. But if there's something that you want to say now, because and Commissioner Dorado, I'm just going to say that Jesse and I and others are saying that you can't go anyplace, and that we intend to have you remain on as a featured community participant, because this work is too important, and you've been too much of a leader in this to let you walk away from it. So I just wanted to let people know that. Sorry, Jose, I didn't clear this with you and Jesse beforehand, but I thought since Mariano mentioned that he won't be here at the next meeting, that he may want to say some words or something to you. But he's not going far. He's not going to be anyplace. We are not letting him go. He's too valuable to this to this ad hoc committee, and he's been the driving force behind it. His vision has kept us going and committed. So anyway, if anybody didn't want to say anything, but otherwise we could wait until the next meeting on Saturday, the 25th.
Well, thank you, Brenda. Just real quickly, I ain't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm more than willing to contribute to the ad hoc to the extent that everybody wants me to. So, you know, the fact I'm transitioning off the commission, it doesn't affect my commitment to this work. So that's not a consideration. So as I said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be right here. All right.
For some reason, I can't find the reactions on the Zoom, but I was trying to get the round of applause there. So just I hope you feel that.
Well, thank you so much. And Mariano, of course, we'll be in touch, and because we talk, as Brenda said it better than I could. You know, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna sail through this. You're in good shape. You got the right attitude, and you know, we're all sending you good thoughts, and we'll all be with you there on the 18th. You know, and afterward, you can count on that. Any closing thoughts? We're of course going to be looking at the second section of the policy, as well as looking at the rewrite. And I just want to make sure that whatever kind of thoughts you have regarding either one, please send them our way, so that in fact they can be incorporated into what's being done. And any questions at all, any comments at all, please don't hesitate to send them forth, because it's too important for us to hear from everybody. And again, as always, we more than appreciate, you know, the time that you take, community members, the time that you take to do this work with us. So you know, we're just really so grateful that you take this time on your Saturday afternoon to be with us and contribute in this way. So I don't know if there's anything else.
I do have one other thing. I am the one who will not be able to be here on Saturday the 23rd. I'll be in an all-day meeting, 2-day Zoom meeting that starts on Friday. So I won't be able to make the 23rd, but I'll make sure that I give my comments and input to you all beforehand if I have anything to add.
Great.
All right.
All righty.
You know, I also have a birthday on the 20th, and so I might not say too many more. I reached the age of 72. So
congratulations!
It's even hard for me to even say those numbers out loud. but there's some plans around here with the family, and so I don't think I'll be around that particular Saturday.
Well, if you could share your secret though, Reggie.
My secret?
Yeah.
To living a ripe old age.
Prayer.
Hey, Reggie, it's not staying young. It's why you so handsome? Staying so
Oh man,
handsome.
come on. God bless you too, Mariano. So maybe we should kick it up to the 30th or something. What do you guys think?
Well, that might not be a bad idea. What do people think about that? Gives us a little more time to do a little more work, and we'll have Commissioner Harden Forte and Reggie with us.
I'm mindful of families and that being the weekend of Halloween. But if y'all are willing, then I mean, I don't got kids, so.
How's that sound?
Sorry. Another thought would be just to keep our regular every other Saturday. Just skip the 23rd and
There
then
you
come
go.
back on November 6th. Is that too far out? That's a thought. Come back on November 6th.
I mean, I imagine there's going to be a lot going into the roles and responsibilities, probably training, probably qualifications piece. Makes a lot of sense.
So we go with November 6th.
Yeah,
as
which would be
our
our
next meeting.
our regular schedule. Yeah, we just skipped the 23rd, and then the 30th we wouldn't otherwise meet anyway, and then come on the 6th.
Okay.
Mariana will be good and strong to be here to help guide us and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Reggie will have recovered from his birthday celebration.
right.
And I'll be here other folks and stuff. So that's good. Okay.
2-day Zoom? Jeez.
Mhm.
A 2-day Zoom meeting? Commissioner?
Yes, for
Okay.
a state bar commission that I'm on. So we
Okay.
start at 8:30 Friday morning, go until 5, and we start again at 8:30 Saturday, and it usually goes all day until 5. I tell you, it's exhausting.
That's when you turn off your camera, right?
No, unfortunately, I can't even turn off my camera. I can't even hide behind the camera. Like no. And I'm presenting for two of the cases that are on, so it's just it's a lot, but it's fun.
Well, bless your heart for doing that work.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys.
So we're in agreement. We'll go with November 6th for our next meeting. And in the meantime, we have our homework assignments, which are considerable. Thank goodness for the great comments we had today. That gives us plenty to think about. So I'm about set to close the meeting unless there's any parting comments. If not, again, as always, thank you so much for your wisdom, your participation, your time, your efforts. They are definitely appreciated. We really are grateful. So let me go ahead and say have a great cumpleaños, Reggie Lyles, 72 years young.
Yep.
Our thoughts are, as always, will be with you, Mariano, and Creighton and Mike, and Pastor Jackie. She's already gone, and thank you all again for being with us and contributing as you have. We really
Great.
And Pastor Jenkins and Candace Elder.
Yeah. Was she okay? Was she here? Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Candace. and
Came a
thank
little
you-
tardy, but
thank you,
I've been on.
Okay, thank you, Candace, as always, and Pastor Jackie. We're going to go ahead and close this meeting. And again, please, any comments, any thoughts you have, please send them our way.